Welcome to the Fermynwoods Contemporary Art Podcast, guest curated and presented by Subterra. I am your host and one half of Subterra, Marie-Chantal Hamrock. We invite you to get lost in the unknown as we take a stroll through rich woodlands, dark forests, and subterrestrial landscapes. As we navigate these eerie and unfamiliar spaces, we will explore artist talks, discussions, and original commissioned sound art. Welcome to our maiden voyage. Developing out of the previous two podcast series, conceived and curated by artist Jessica Harvey, myself and Astrid Björklund are delighted to be hosting and curating the newest season of the Fermynwoods Contemporary Art Podcast. For our first episode, we commissioned sound artist Samm Anga to respond to the theme of Xylophobia. Xylophobia is Fermynwoods Contemporary Art's new 2-year programme funded by Arts Council England. The programme is named from the fear of wooden objects or forests, addressing related fears and issues of place and belonging, which go to the heart of community feelings of exclusion from both the art world and woodland spaces. Samm is a Nigerian-born composer, producer, and singer. In his current work, he finds himself questioning the multifaceted identity of sound in the Anthropocene. In the following piece, titled Chesime, Samm takes a solitary journey into his own psyche and heritage, ruminating on his own fear of nature, water. Through field recordings, sonic representations of Nigerian mermaid song, and recorded conversations with his parents, he navigates the listener through a rich, ambient soundscape.
Xylophobia. Xylophobe. Xylophone. Xylome, cyclone, cycle, exciting, excite, exceed, zeal, jealous, jealous, tenuous, tenure, tonal, telephone, xenophobe, xenophobe, xylophobia, xylophobe, xylophone, Tycho, Tyson, Type, Deep, Steel, Spirit, Jealous, Taylor, Taylor, Tyler, Taylor, Jennifer, Jennifer, Xylophobia, 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 Xylo, Xylo, Tycho, Tyson, Type, Keep, Steel, Kill, Jealous, Taylor, Taylor, Tyler.
Then we have the boat. We usually go in a boat. All of us have the canoe, we call them the canoe, and the paddle. You can paddle almost 4 5 hours paddle, 7 hours, 12 hours paddle in the sea, even into the ocean. Paddle. That's what we do that day. We don't have the boat, the flying boat. Later they now brought the flying boat, boat. Those the flying engine. Otherwise, no matter how long, the boat, they carry paddle, and the 4 5 people paddle. When one sits on the seat to control the boat as the head, then they paddle. They will all paddle. The way they will carry the paddle is like carrying it. It's very speedy. They try, they bang, 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 2 3 hours. They paddle and go. I paddle as well to Veronica. They did. Yeah. That is our occupation. Don't have any choice from childhood. You just learn. That is our occupation. That is our occupation. My dad is a big fisherman in the sense that he has a boat and he has other people he trained, and a lot of people goes with him. So they go along because they can stay in the fishing swamp. They have houses where they build. They can stay there for. Then their wives sell articles, carry all those things. Because when they get into the river, they spend months there, 1 month, 2 months before they. Where they go in the sea, far away, about maybe 2 to 4 hours. So they stay there to be catching the fish. The wife caught and they dry the fish as well. They smoke the fish then. Not all catching, they sell them fresh and they smoke them. So their wives buy these fish from them, then smoke those fish, then take them to the town to sell them.
So basically living inside the water.
Yes, stay there in the swamp. They build houses. Swamp bamboo houses, they build them. That is our occupation. Going to the village, staying in the village, they're taking you people to go, you are too young with it. It's such a tedious something, you are too young, and it's not something that easily that you people can be able to do.
Mm-hmm.
Because people are not brought up like that in the village. It's only those who live and brought up in the village at their age. Yes, we can do that.
man-made festivals. They will come out from the sea and do, because some people, when they cast net and they hook a roof, a man-made roof, you dive to go and oh, so you are the ones spoiling our house. They arrest the person, keep him there. And then people will say the man is has lost in the sea. After maybe 1 week, 2 weeks, the man will come out. When they come out, he's deaf and dumb. And because they are illiterate, if he's illiterate, he would have been able to write down all what he saw. But because he's an illiterate, he cannot write. He's deaf and dumb, so he cannot explain what he saw. The last man of them died just after the war. The last of them. Nobody, you can, that's what I'm saying. The man who is deaf and they make him deaf and dumb. So he cannot relate what he saw. He can only draw on the ground. Most of those things ended in the 60s. Just before the Civil War. But most of the water spirits, mermaid, and other creatures activities, they disappeared when due to this oil exploration came in. They started shooting dynamites and all into the sea. You see big noise and all that make them to migrate away. Otherwise, in our coastal area, there were many. They were living together, but not communicating together.
Fought together. Fought together.
It's the red boat ride.
Oy.
Now is the boat ride.
Yeah, splash it. Yeah, said there'll be some splash. So yeah, that one is big boats now. So woo. Wow, the island.
When the main sea, the big boat, you go like this one and bounce like this. Bam, bam.
Yeah.
Really bounce like the wave as it comes. Then you see a hand like this, then a big hill. You go down like this.
Wow. And everything falls down.
Oh, but then they have changed everything. If anything don't change, television, everything will scatter. I said we are going to be wet. We will definitely be wet. Said no, stop there. We will go back. We don't share a job. We don't see. That means not I will. That means not I will.
No.
So, come on, there we can do. There we can do this.
Is de meneer zou net aan de... Oh, maar toch is de winnaar. Wow. Zo. Wie dan ook niet. Wie bellen, wie bitte. Nee, die dat zie dan hebben. Wil je smoke this up. Wil we? Oh, nou zo. Maar, zie dan zo, ben of zie dan ook. Stop je dit. Nee, is slim binnen elke doen. Well, yeah, well, you know what it is? Chaps, must say, but that's it. The chaps say. They are so busy on. They are so diligent.
Xylophobia. Xylophobe. Xylophone. Xylo. Cyclone. Cycle. Exciting. Excite. Exceed. Deal. Jealous. Jealous. Tenuous. Tenure. Title. Telephone. Xenophobe. Xenophobe.
Today we're also joined for a discussion with Samm Anga and Veronica Petukhov, who make up the collaborative duo Muto Major. Veronica is a visual artist and VJ, working across digital media and sound art. Veronica also responded to the Xylophobia theme through moving image and audio, which you can see on our website fermynwoods.org. Veronica reimagined the mythological character of Lisovik, inspired by Slavic folk tales her grandmother would tell her when she would visit her in Odessa in Ukraine. As the story goes, the Lisovik is a seldom seen forest spirit who is mostly harmless, but when angered can be treacherous. Veronica reimagines this entity through a 3D environment, layering poetry over an uncanny floating forest. Together, Samm and Veronica blur the lines between the audio and the visual, creating an exciting hybrid form that exists somewhere in the realm of music, dance, theatre, and visual art. Thank you guys so much for being here and for doing your two pieces. It's really exciting to start off the Xylophobia program with these two very different responses to the theme. I was going to ask if you could maybe briefly each talk about your piece and your thinking behind it, and then we can kind of chat about them.
Yeah, sure. Shall I go first, Sam?
Yeah, of course.
Whatever
is easiest.
All right. So I did a digital video piece. Basically, I'll start with the technical stuff. I incorporated both 3D renders, which is a type of art I've been really getting into recently and doing more and more after I graduated from uni, actually. And I also used ready-made videos, so not filmed by me, but found online, royalty-free, so it's fine to use them, and just edited using generative coding and created these type of glitchy patterns and just effects that you wouldn't find in a normal editing software. The story behind it is I was thinking about the theme you told me and how I relate to the forest. And since I was a kid, I remember my grandma always telling me about stories from Slavic, Ukrainian type of stories and things that children would hear when they go to bed, and to be even like, I think in the past they would say the stories to be scared so children wouldn't go to the forest alone and wouldn't get lost. And it's this creature called Lesavik. He's found both in Poland and Russia, Ukraine, like all those Slav countries has their own names for it. And basically, it's usually represented as a old male figure, like a grandpa. He's usually kind, but he's the protector of the forest. And, you know, children are scared of him because he can get angry if you do something wrong. So he's a bit of this interesting creature. Depends how you see him. So I thought this is perfect because I was scared of him when I was a child, and my grandma always said, "Oh, be careful where you go because Lesavik is going to be there and he's going to, you know, tell you to go away and scare you." And I thought instead of creating a figure like a human figure, I did this, I don't know, crazy ball shape that's in the forest, and it's not really humanoid at all, and that's how I envisioned him. And I also used this Ukrainian poem about him that I distorted and made all these weird sounds and just created lots of layers and things. So yeah, that's pretty much summarized.
Nice. I think, yeah, both of your works, like the thing that really struck me was like the kind of myth building and world building between both of them. Like that was a really nice connection. Sam, what about you? What was your thinking behind your episode?
Yeah, distorted weird sounds and created lots of layers is very similar to my process as well.
Yeah.
I kind of started thinking about the work last year when I spoke to Jessica, I think who was the previous curator for it.
Yeah.
We spoke a lot about like xylophobia as specifically as a fear of wooded areas, and then kind of expanded that into thinking about it as a fear of nature and or natural spaces and what might lead to a fear of natural spaces. And it got to the point of talking about classism and how you might not feel comfortable in a natural space because it might signify someone else's land depending on where you live. There's also like racial stuff about who natural spaces are deemed to be for in terms of representation, and then obviously the like mythology and fear of the creepy crawlies and the dark and all the things that you initially think of. So I really liked those directions because it kind of offered this kind of intersection of all these different things that xylophobia could be about. So I wanted to delve deeper into that. And I guess I've never had a fear of a wooded space. So I was thinking about, well, what is a natural thing that I feel like I've gone through a phase of having a fear of? And I landed on water, which, yeah, I've had like, when I was younger, I remember I used to be really like terrified of like swimming pools. And I guess the thought of drowning for some reason was something that was in my brain. I don't know. They always say like babies can swim. But I feel like my first memories of water were just like, don't get me in there. So I wanted to kind of delve in deeper into that. And that brought me to think about my heritage and my family and learning more about I thought it was just my mum's dad, but both my parents and their parents were all just like fishers. We just came from like a fishing village where everyone fished. And I found that hilarious because my granddad would have spent probably as much of his life at sea as he did on land, but then somehow I had a grandson that was like terrified of water. So I wanted to just delve into these contradictions and explore them in context of my relationship with nature. So I did lots of field recording, some interviews with my parents, and just builded this kind of soundscape of all these elements, and trying to think of, if you're at sea, what kind of soundscape would surround you? Maybe lots of water and voices, but then distorted voices sometimes when you can't hear them as clearly. And then with my dad, we spoke a lot about when the oil exploration became like really big and the impact that had on fishing. So I kind of had these like horrible metallic like oil rig sounds as well that would just consume all the other sounds whenever they came in. And yeah, just kind of created that journey over the course of the work.
And then, I was really struck by that kind of fluid movement, which I guess is quite watery in itself, between that really natural watery sound and then these really kind of industrial, really kind of, like you said, like oil rig sounds. You're like, oh, how are these related, Yeah, it's funny how you were both talking about this sort of like inherited like story from family as well. It's funny how phobias can be like kind of generational, or I don't know, or like learned maybe. But I thought it was interesting, Sam, the way you kind of used wordplay and kind of like this kind of connective word to go from like xylophobia to xenophobia, and the way the sound is edited kind of creates this sort of like entanglement between all these words where it is like water. It's like you're kind of drowning in these different meanings, or like coming up for air and going back down again. I thought it was really effective. And I really enjoyed the kind of repetition. There was something which felt kind of like, I don't know if you meant for it to be like this at all, but to me it kind of felt like an incantation of sorts. Like the words had this kind of focus to them, like they were coming in and out of focus, and sometimes they were just kind of like vague apparitions, and sometimes they were like the meat of the sound, and that was really nice. And it felt very much like kind of traces of memory or of time, or I thought that was really effective.
Thank you. Yeah, So when I had the idea of kind of this word journey and wrote it all down, I was kind of, oh, that's really cool. That kind of exists as a text piece. But then, yeah, when I was kind of trying to record it, I was like, it became quite important how it was performed. And I think ultimately I settled on something that was a bit like an incantation. And I'm happy that that came across. And what was the second thing you said? The journey, the words coming in and out.
Yeah, kind of like sort of like apparitions or memories or ghosts almost, you know, it felt very ghostly.
Yeah, there's this plugin I used a lot for this piece called Drift Maker, and I'm not sponsored by them, but it does really interesting things with. It's usually used for like non-vocal things. I feel like I've heard it being used for like just to make ambient soundscapes, but when used on stuff with voices in them, it does really interesting things where it kind of reverses certain phrases and kind of stops and starts and like chops it up. And so when I put that onto that incantation, it created this really percussive like sounds that didn't obviously make sense but were slightly familiar. And when you were talking about like memories and distant apparitions, I feel like that part for me really makes it, because like I obviously know the text and I've recorded it, but then every time I hear that, I'm kind of like, it sounds weirdly familiar. Of course it sounds familiar, you know, but yeah, it just manages to make it just that slight bit obscure.
That water was kind of like the perfect vessel or like object to kind of have be like present throughout, I thought, because especially when you're talking about kind of movement or like xenophobia, for example, like water is the vessel that we enter or leave a country. Most people would, and it's this sort of like permeable substance that has so many different forms. And I thought, you know, the way sometimes the sound would end and there would just maybe be like this kind of bassy kind of, sometimes there would be like these kind of gaps. And I to keep going with the theme of like incantation, it felt like there was space there for like conjuring, like, you know, using these stories from your family to like create new meanings and new myths. And yeah, that kind of myth making was just like really fascinating, how that was the thing that came out of xylophobia and this fear of something, because I think myths are often made in like how we, you know, how people deal with fears is by creating stories, like with, for example, how do I pronounce the forest person?
It's Lisovik.
Yeah, so that's obviously a way, you know, to like warn children of the dangers of like this dark wooded space. And the only way we can really like kind of do that is by making up these, or maybe they are real, who knows, but stories these stories to kind of understand that fear, I think. Or in the piece of text that comes up at the beginning of your piece, Veronica, the forester who's kind of got this watchful gaze. And I think, you know, there is always that kind of feeling when you're in the woods of voyeurism, you know.
Я їм затіла розкриваю, ще як на прось.
And then, you know, the floating island, I thought it was so wild, because at first I thought, you know, your pieces didn't have that much that I thought was in common. But then when I saw this floating island and I was thinking about water separating people, or water being a vessel around which we can move, that kind of, and also the kind of fluid, bubbly figure of the creature, like kind of like a sprite that was glowing in the dark. I thought that, oh, there's a really strong connection here.
Yeah, it's actually interesting because me and Sam haven't spoken for a while, and we just decided to do our own thing. And turns out we did quite similar like ideas, and there are some connections still. So I find that very interesting, even the enchantment and the chanting, because the poem I used a lot of echo and delay and distortion, so you can repeatedly hear the same words over and over again. So connects very much to what Sam was just telling us.
And also just that feeling of isolation that you managed to create just by kind of separating this earth from like, because it really just looked like a kind of floating planet almost.
Yeah.
So,
Well, that was the idea, because when you're in a forest alone, if that happens, I'd be scared. I know I'm not that scared of forests, but there's still, as you were saying, an eerie feeling. I feel watched all the time. Maybe it's the animals, but there's an energy, if you believe it or not, but there's definitely something going on in these forests, So when you feel that, why I did it floating like that, obviously it was a bit mythological, but also, as you said, you feel like disconnected and you're by yourself, surrounded by water or by trees.
Oh, also, I really wanted to talk to you about like the power of the glitch in the film, and I know you use glitch kind of a lot in your work in the visuals, but I don't know if you've ever read the book Glitch Feminism by Legacy Russell.
No, I'll write that down.
A brilliant like manifesto within it, where she talks about the power of the glitch as being something which is not a fixed point, so it allows for movement and abstraction and leakages and all these things that Sam is also talking about with water, and so it's really fascinating how those two kind of like the audio of Sam's would have worked with some of your visuals as well,
Yeah, true, definitely.
Which is really cool. How I was gonna ask if you two had like spoken about your pieces before, or you just kind of did your own thing.
No, I think after Sonica we were like, we need a break now, thank you very much. No, I'm joking, we're working on it. It's not you, it's me.
Yeah, no. Well, I mean, we always joke that like we permanently share like 2 or 3 brain cells at this point. And, I guess I want to ask, like, why did you think of like creating like a watery feel to your video? Because it's a forest story, right?
Yeah. I was thinking there is usually water in forest, maybe a river or some sort of, there is a water aspect, even in the morning when you wake up. What's it called in English? The dew on, is that what's it called? Like dew, like watery, so it's misty, and there is a lot of water aspect in a forest. And then as I was thinking how to create this 3D scene, I have to say, like, I was just making the forest and I just didn't like it. It didn't speak to me. And I thought, you know what, I feel when you're in a forest alone, you really feel lonely, like everything looks the same and you're surrounded, you're like on a little planet by yourself. And that's why I thought, let's make a floating forest, little rock with some trees on it. And also obviously because I was doing mythology and, tales and stuff like that, it gives this like little magical feeling as well, in my opinion.
But yeah, it's quite funny with mythology, because with my work, I was kind of like, I was so excited about the chat I had initially about it, that I was like, yeah, I'm just going to completely go into this direction about like, this political and sociological implications of xylophobia, and was just not wanting to think about mythology. And then I started speaking to my dad, and he's talking about like seeing mermaids and when they went fishing, and I was like, yeah, they used to like kidnap people sometimes. They'd come back and they'd be like, deaf and they can't speak. I was like, whoa, this is so insane, and then it obviously inspired my work, because I was kind of thinking of incorporating that element into it, mermaid song and designing synths that sound like weird vocal textures and things like that. So yeah, it's funny how mythology crept into my work organically, and how water crept into yours.
So we're all working across, like, well, Veronica, you're moving across moving image and, VJing and, sound art, and, you guys are both working in theater, kind of like a theatrical performance art kind of space as well. And when I watched you perform, I really was like kind of moved by, well, obviously the work itself, but also your movement together on stage, like, even though like Veronica's you're not playing an instrument, right? It really looks like you are, the way you're like, there's like a rhythm to how
I was petrified for the first parts of it. then I think I felt Sam's energy a lot, and obviously we were nervous, and it was a lot of emotions to go on stage. I'm not a stage person. Sam definitely knows his way around being in front of people, and the first 15-20 minutes I was a bit stuck, I didn't know what to do with myself, and then I looked at Sam and I saw how he was dancing and performing, and I just like felt the vibes, the energy. I started like not as much as he was, but I definitely felt something going through my body, and
that's great
as well.
Yeah, you could tell, and it's it was so fascinating to see the kind of different roles that you both play within that collaboration, but also how you kind of really come together in so many different kind of forms.
But yeah, I really liked how you mentioned that it looked like Veronica was playing an instrument. I love that because we both and this is why I love live performance, and it's funny because I think most people that have perceived our work has probably not been live. Heretic was the first time we got to really do that properly anyway. So it's nice that you kind of saw that, and then we're having this discussion because when things go live, we actually both are using the same equipment. It's just controllers, and I love controllers because now they look like anything. They traditionally have a piano with buttons, but now it's just like boxes and pads and knobs, and you essentially just learn to perform with the machine. So even whether you're doing visual or audio, you're performing. And that's one of the reasons why I thought it was like unnecessary for Heretic that Veronica would be on stage with me, because I think it would not have worked or been the same with her like hiding at the back of the room, and similarly wouldn't have worked if she was on stage. But then because you can't be on I like the stage because it's kind of unforgiving. You can't just exist on stage and blend in, so you can't do what you were doing in the back of the room on stage. And I think I did come into it a bit like, oh yeah, Veronica, like you can do some vocal work, you can do these voices, like do these voiceovers and move, and we'll like coordinate. And then she was like, Sam, I need to like I will forget because I will just be like, panicking. So I was like, okay, cool. So I just streamlined what we had to do to just facing each other, existing physically, wearing the costumes, and then the movement just organically came out of it all.
Thinking about like action-based research, so obviously Veronica, you talked about your grandmother's stories, and Sam, you talked about your parents' stories, and I was just thinking about actually like so much of our research is just already there, like it's like lived daily experiences. And I thought reading both of your pieces statements, it was really exciting to hear about this kind of like personal research method.
I have been, like you said, more on my personal interests and my personal research. Before in university, obviously, you go to the library, you read a lot of books, you go into topics that maybe you weren't thinking about. Maybe I should continue doing that too, but right now I just find myself thinking about my past, my heritage, all stuff that you relate to, because I think when you create art and it's something you are very passionate about and that's in your DNA, let's say, you're going to do a good art piece, I think.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it was really fun. I enjoyed and challenging myself with the research process for this piece, because I've not, since my master's, I've not really done like proper long form just sound, which is very exciting, because as much as I enjoy working with other mediums, it is nice to like go back to just sound on a theoretical level, and not even like music or composition or sound design. And I knew that in order to do it, I would have to really delve into like a proper research process. And I kind of, when I was writing the art statement, I don't know if it read a bit like the blurb of some action mystery novel or something, all these different locations, because I think it's something I've noticed since I've graduated, that you're not as bound by, well, I've got a lecture tomorrow, you kind of actually just live in the experience of creating art. And in a way, life helps you do that. And I kind of set that intention of, I want to like connect more to my like heritage, particularly my mother's side. And so I ended up having a residency down in Hampshire. And my mum asked me to take my dad to see her in Dover, which was a whole like 4-hour trip from Kent, which is where they actually live. So there's a lot of driving involved. And it was during that long drive that I ended up speaking to my dad and recording the chat, and again, playing around with the quality so that you can kind of tell that both conversations happen in very different spaces, both through the editing and through the fact that there's an engine going, and I have to like think about that when I edit. And we ended up just doing all these things that were water related without me having planned them. So we went on a boat trip together, which is I recorded. We did a lot of swimming. There was a jacuzzi. I did a steam bath, a sauna, just because it was like in the hotel that they were staying in. And I hadn't even planned to stay over. It was just because my dad had messed up the times and we'd gone a day late. So I had the opportunity to stay a bit longer and eat lots of seafood, and just my parents would just keep telling me all these stories about, like, I didn't know my mom had to take like a 4-hour boat trip to get to school and then stay there for the semester and take a 4-hour boat trip back. And she would just talk about how, like, yeah, it was horrible and intense, but she was fine. There were people that were like crying and being sick, but being from where we're from, she wasn't afraid of water. And yeah, if this process continued on, I would have loved to go to Nigeria and like try and do some fishing and go to see the oil rigs and just really stretch out. I even did a thing where I was looking at my relationship with water personally, and this it's not the consequential part of the piece, but it's some of the soundscapes you can hear. I've tried to record every drink of water I had in a day because I realized I was having problems with regulating and not dehydrating myself. So yeah, I did that. I did lots of just little interesting things where I was kind of almost like a performance art process as well, where you're like challenging your body to do things.
You can find more from Samm at his website samm-anga.co.uk and Veronica at her blog vncptk.tumblr.com. Accompanying images for this episode, as well as Veronica's video, are at our website. There are links to all of this in the episode description. This episode has been edited by Astrid Björklund, the other half of Subterra. Thank you for listening to the Fermynwoods Contemporary Art Podcast. If you enjoy our podcast, make sure to positively rate, review, and subscribe on your podcatcher. It helps other people find the podcast, and it makes us feel good about ourselves. Visit fermynwoods.org for more information on our program and to sign up for our monthly email newsletter. Follow us at Fermynwoods on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, and make sure to check out Subterra at sub.terrestrials on Instagram. Thanks for listening. Hope to see you back here soon.